Hi, my name is Risa Milne. I am a recovered alcoholic since March 3rd, 2004. And it is a great privilege for me to come out today and share my experience and knowledge with my working the steps through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I just, to plug my home group, my home group is the PPG Webster meeting. We meet on Zoom on Sundays at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. If anybody wants to know the calculations for their time, we can talk after the meeting, and I can help you out with that. Also, I can offer the Zoom information. Tomorrow morning, we do a foundation meeting at my home group, the first Sunday of every month. And tomorrow we have Myers Raymer coming to do that foundation meeting. So if anybody wants that information, I will put it in the chat or just ask me later in the meeting. So, I reached out to Steve a few days ago and asked if there was anything like a particular topic he wanted me to talk on or anything like that. And he just said, we talk about how we've worked the steps through through the directions of the book. And so, I'm going to do that. I have been sober a little over 18 years now. And so I've worked the steps quite a few times. So I'm going to talk mainly about the most recent time that I've worked the steps. But before that, I will tell a little bit of my experience drinking, what it was like without God in my life, and what it's like now. So I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous very, very, very early. I first came in when I was 22. I didn't get sober till I was 24. I didn't know when I first met if I was an alcoholic or not. I listened to people talking in the meetings, and a lot of people would talk about, being homeless, or they would talk about going to prison, or they would talk about going to rehabs and inpatients and drunk driving incidents and getting divorced and losing their children. And again, I was 22 years old. Not much of that had happened to me yet. And I really honestly got the thought process that in order to be an alcoholic, I had to have these things happen to me, or my life had to be like absolutely completely destroyed. And so I didn't think I was an alcoholic, and the thing is our book talks about the directions that we need to take to get sober, and they're pretty drastic directions. And so, that was, I wasn't going to do it. If I didn't think I was an alcoholic and I didn't think I was one of you, then I didn't need the solution that you guys were doing. And, I did find some friends, and I hung around the rooms of AA, and I would play euchre and I play poker, and it was fun. And until it wasn't fun, until, I would sit there and be like, if this is what AA is about, I want to kill myself. I hate my life. It's miserable. And eventually I just pick up again. And this happened a few times over and over again. And what happened is I eventually found a woman who had worked the steps out of the big book. And the important thing about this woman was she also kind of sat around the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for 7 years, not working the steps. And I knew her. She and I used to like be miserable together in the back of the room, and, just be so angry and just disgusted by people. And what had happened that first week that I came back to AA, was that I saw her and she was really happy. She was really happy. And this was like strange to me. It was really, really strange. And I went up to her and I said, what happened to you? What's going on, with you? And she just looked at me and she said, like, I worked the steps out of the big book. And I was like, wait, you did what? Because like we used to sit in the back of the room and make fun of the big book thumpers, and we call them, big book Nazis. And, like we would do those things. And so like, this was just incredulous to me. Like, I was just like, what is going on? And at the time it was a convention, and if anyone's been to a convention, like it's like happy, it's joyous, like it's hard not to be in a good mood when you're at a convention. And so I just kind of took what she said with a grain of salt. And Sunday night, at the end, the convention was no longer going on, and I ended up in my apartment with my two cats and just absolutely miserable. And and I didn't want, I didn't want to live with myself. I didn't want to, it just felt so uncomfortable. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. I felt like I had this heavy fog coming down on me. It just like almost suffocating me. And I was so miserable. And a few days later, I went to a meeting, and that same woman was there at that meeting. And unlike me, she was still happy, and I was a mess. And she was still happy. And I went up to her again. I was like, no, really, what happened? Like, how are you so happy still? Like, what changed in your life? Did you get a new guy? All of those things. And she was like, Risa, really, what I worked the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was just so broken at that point that I was like, can you do that for me? Can we do that? And she looked at me, and she was raised, when she did the steps, she had one of those sponsors who was just tough love, and she looked at me and she said, sure. She said, these are the requirements. You need to be at my house at 6:30 p.m. every Sunday. We are going to go through the book from 6:30 to 7:30. You're going to take me over to our home group, and my home group is going to be your home group, and we're going to give you whatever service position we think you should take, and you're going to take it, and you're going to do it. You are also going to get 30 numbers of women. You can't get them on one of those lists that get passed around. You have to get them face to face. And you need to start calling at least one of those people, one of those women every single day. And she said, and that is what you need to do if you want me to work with you. And I'm one of those people, you tell me what to do and I'm just going to push against you. I'm going to be like, nope, not happening. I'm not going to do it. Screw you. And who do you think you are? And I was just so broken. I was so broken and so tired and so just done that I finally was like, whatever you tell me to do. And so I started going to that woman's house, and she started taking me through the book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And see, I didn't know if I was an alcoholic still or not. I knew that I was miserable. And the thing is I didn't know what an alcoholic was. Oftentimes when I was in meetings, people would talk about their stresses, and they would talk about how miserable they were, and they talked about their consequences, or they would say things to me, because I was still so young, and they would say things to me like, I drank more than you spilled. And so I didn't know what an alcoholic was. I didn't know that it didn't have to do with how much I drank. I didn't know that it didn't have to do with the consequences I had. I didn't know that didn't have to do with my background or how I was raised or any of those things. And what she did is she took me through the book, and she talked to me about what an alcoholic is. And she took me to the doctor's opinion, and she talked to me about this allergy. And she talked to me about the allergy of the body, that when I put alcohol in my body, it reacts differently than it does in a normal person, in a normal drinker. And that only happens in an alcoholic. And she took me through her own experience, and she took me through my own experience, and we matched my experience to the experience in the discussion in the book. And I was able to see that I did indeed have this craving for alcohol that happens through this allergy. There were many times where I went out drinking not to get drunk. There were times where I was just like, I need just one or two, just to ease ease what's going on inside of me. I just need that. I need to be at work later today. I can't get drunk. I can't not show up. I'm going to lose my job again. And then I'm going to have to call my mom. I'm going to have to get money. I'm going to have to deal with that disappointment. And it was miserable. It was miserable living that way. And I really honestly was only going out to have one or two. And what would happen is I would drink while I was having that one or two, and I didn't know what was going on with my body. I didn't know that I had an allergy to alcohol. What I did know is that I thought I was changing my mind. What I thought was, oh, you know what? I had two. It is only 7. I don't have to be at work until 10. I can probably have one or two more. And one or two more would end up leading to my brain thinking, well, if I eat a little and I drink some water and I give myself a little time between drinks, I could probably get 2 or 3 more in me and still be able to get to work, not, like, and drive to work without a problem. And like, that was what happened. I started doing this alcoholic math in my head, and sure enough, after a while, it was like, you know what? I'm not getting there. I know I'm not getting there. Who in my family hasn't died yet, to my employer? Who in my, like, what diseases? Um, this is back when still wasn't any cell phones or internets, and newscasters would be like, oh, the flu is going around, or strep's going around. And so I would sit there going like, oh, have they been talking about anything going around yet? Like, what could I possibly have that's wrong with me that would allow me to call in sick to work without them firing me? And eventually, usually what would end up happening in the long run is I would not end up drinking, or I would not end up I drank a lot. I would not end up going to work. I would not end up calling, and I would lose another job. And so, we put that experience of that allergy up against the experience in this book. And so, like, that would be great. That would be great if that was my only problem, right? If alcohol was my problem and my only problem, then I could do what anyone else would do if they had a problem. I would be able to stop it. I would be able to have some sort of manageability around this thing. However, time and time and time again, every time, and the doctor's opinion on page, if anybody's looking in their big book at all, in the 4th edition, it's XXVIII, which is 28 in the Roman numerals. We in AA get really good at Roman numeral reading, but the doctor talks about the cycle that we go through, and the cycle is that we have this allergy, and we have this restless, irritable, and discontentedness, completely sober, completely without a drink in our body. And we get to a place where we just need that ease and comfort. And so we pick a drink, and then that craving develops. And after that craving develops, we end up having a spree, and we emerge remorseful. And that would happen to me over and over again. I would emerge remorseful from these nights out. I would come up my driveway at 6 a.m, horrified at the person I was that night, horrified of what I said and what I did and who I talked to. And I would get into my apartment, and I'd be like, I'm never doing that again. And while that thought was still going, I would go and I'd take all my alcohol and any other substances I might have had, and I'd throw them all out in the garbage. And I knew that wasn't enough. So I'd throw the cat litter over them, because, there's cat litter over it. Why would you go through the cat litter again? Well, that was very quickly something that I was doing on a regular basis, was going through that cat litter a few hours or a day later after I had made that remorseful promise to myself, because I needed it. I needed that alcohol. And so, one of the things that our book talks about is There's a Solution. It talks about, on page 22, actually page 23, these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. So if I don't take the first drink, this stuff doesn't happen to me, right? If I don't pick up the drink, then the allergy can't happen. However, I can't not pick up the first drink. And that was one of the things that I didn't understand. I didn't understand, like, I couldn't control what happened when I put alcohol in my body, but I didn't understand that I had absolutely no choice in not picking up the drink. And so what it says is, thereby, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in their mind rather than in his body. And that also was like crazy to me. And so we have this second part of this disease, this mental obsession. And the mental obsession is that, that I have is talked about on page 30. And it talks about the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. And what that is, I couldn't do that. It says control and enjoy my drinking. When I was controlling it, I was miserable. I definitely wasn't enjoying it. And when I was able to enjoy it, there was no controlling it. I was not trying at all to not drink. I was enjoying myself to the nines, or at least I thought so. And the thing is, in my head, I can't get the true from the false. The truth was, when I drank, I lost myself. When I drank, I lost friends. When I drank, bad things would happen. I would lose my job. I would end up where I shouldn't have ended up. Things would happen to me that shouldn't have happened to me. That's the truth around my drinking. But the false is, it's not going to be that way this time. It's going to be different this time. If I drink beer versus tequila, this is going to change. If I drink with these people who can control their drinking, that's going to be different. If I just stay home and have one or two, I'm going to stay home and I'm not going to go off looking for any more, and that's the false. That's the false, is my mind is going to constantly try and trick me into picking up that drink again. And so I was able to take the knowledge that was in the book that my sponsor explained to me, and I was able to put that up against my own experience, because step one is not a thinking step. It's not a mental step. This is an experience step. This is something that I need to know out of my own experience. It says we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently maybe, has to be smashed. I need that to be smashed. And there's no way somebody else is going to be able to say, yeah, you know what, you are an alcoholic, and that's going to get to me. That's not going to get to me. If somebody else says, yeah, something's wrong with you, da 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 da, or gives me fear, or any of those things, that's not going to keep me sober. The doctor's opinion says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. And frothy emotional appeal is all of those emotional things that people tell us to try and talk us out of drinking. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your kids. Oh, do you really, you really want to treat, like that person that way? Why do you keep doing this? You're always in trouble. But that stuff doesn't keep us sober. It doesn't get us sober. And it has to be smashed. And it can only be smashed when I can put my own experience up to that knowledge, And so, what happened is I did that, and I became desperately willing to work the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And here's the thing, is at the time I did not believe in God. I did not want a spiritual program. I hated the fact that it was spiritual in nature. And I knew that when you told me that a God of my understanding, what you really meant is just until you start to believe the way that we believe. I thought you were all trying to trick me. And thankfully, we have the second step question, and it asks us, It asks us, and it's on page 47, do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? And my husband at one point, he said, I've never heard anyone say no to that question. And I looked him straight in the eyes and said, I did, and I did. And you know what my sponsor did? She didn't blink an eye. She looked me straight in the eyes and she goes, can you at least believe you're not God? Can you at least believe that you can't do this? And I looked at her and I thought a little bit, because it's not an easy question to answer if I'm not God or not. I thought a little bit and I thought, I didn't make that tree outside. I didn't make the wind blow. All right. I'll concede that I'm not God. And she said, you know what, then let's just keep it going. We're not going to spend time on coming up with these scenarios of what God is and what God isn't. We're not going to waste time doing these other things. We need to get you to a power in which you can stay sober. And she had faith that by the time I got through the steps, I would find that power. And so I started to take the steps, and I was open to the spiritual solution, and I worked the steps as they are in order, and I got sober, and I had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And now I didn't believe in God still. That came quite a few years later, after a lot of inventory and experience getting through life sober and doing life comes to you, and and that was okay. That was absolutely okay, because I continued to believe in the spiritual program of action that was in this book. And now I want to tell you something that I fell victim to. I fell victim, as it is talked about on page 32 of our book. And it comes from the story about the carpet slippers guy. Everybody knows him as the man of 30, but I'm like on this diehard kick to try and get him called the carpet slippers guy. Carpet slippers. Anyway, the man of 30, he stops drinking because he's not successful in his job, and his job becomes his higher power, and he's able to stay sober until the day he retires. And it talks about then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline had qualified him to drink as other people. And so here's the thing is, around, I don't know, 10 or 11 years sober, it wasn't that I drank and I thought I would be safe. But what happened was I felt that my amount of sobriety would be enough to keep me sober without working the actual spiritual steps and directions in my life. And I started to stop prayer, and I stopped meditation, and I stopped inventory taking. I stopped talking to my sponsors, that, I would go months and started going years without talking to anybody. I would talk to people who I knew would give me the answer I wanted to hear. And but I did continue to sponsor, and I did continue to be of service work in my home group. And I did continue to go to my home group on a regular basis. However, I had stopped believing in the actual part of our program that I didn't have any power in the choice of drink. I stopped believing that I was powerless over alcohol. And I got to this belief where I felt that because I did these things, I was going to stay sober. And really, those things are amazing and they're wonderful, but I'm doing them out of self-will. And self-will and self-knowledge will never, ever, ever be the answer for me. And so what happened is at 16 years sober, because I like to be miserable for a really, really, really long time, and I apparently have a very high tolerance for pain. What happened was at 16 years sober, also, my sobriety date was like literally 2 days before the whole entire world shut down for COVID. So at 16 years sober, I found myself sitting in a parking lot, desperate to drink again. not knowing what to do, crying into my lap, sitting next to a bar thinking, what if? And the only thing that kept me from drinking that night was my pride. It was my pride of, I can't drink. Everybody in Rochester knows who I am. Everybody knows that I've been sober this long. I can't drink. But the thing was, is like, I was so miserable. I was so miserable in my life. And I had all the outside things anybody would think that they would want. Anything, all the things that you would say to yourself, well, if I just had this, I'd be happy. I had it all, but it wasn't enough, because inside I was completely and utterly empty. And we started using hand sanitizer all the time. And the next thing I knew is my husband had to hide the hand sanitizer. He had to hide the isopropyl alcohol. He had to hide cleaning products from me, because I was so terrified that I was going to pick them up and drink them, because I was so miserable. And COVID hit and I was alone with my children, and I didn't have a relationship with a higher power at all. And I knew I was screwed. I knew I was absolutely and utterly screwed. And so what happened, because I have not picked up a drink since March 3rd, 2004. So what happened was, at 16 years, my husband comes up to me. I'm in bed. I'm in bed all weekend long. I have 2 young children. I want nothing to do with them. I want nothing to do with my husband. I'm thinking about divorce on a regular basis, just so he can take custody and I don't have to deal with them, and I can just run away and drink in California. I don't know why it's California. It's sunny. And I can just drink my life away. And that's all I wanted. And he came running upstairs, and he heard this woman who was sharing her story, and she talked about how she felt like she had lost all hope in Alcoholics Anonymous after she had double years of sobriety. And this idea that if I'm this miserable at 16 years sober, AA is not going to work for me. The only way it's going to work is if I reset myself by drinking again. And that was my true belief, was I was never going to find happiness in Alcoholics Anonymous unless I reset my sobriety date, and I had to drink again, and I had to hit that wall. And that woman talked to me, and she talked to my heart about that. And it's really important that we talk about that stuff, because we do often hear things that are wonderful for the newcomer. The newcomer is so, so, so important. But our 5th tradition says that our primary purpose is to carry this message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And there are so many people with so much time in our fellowship that still are suffering. And I know that this is a meeting for people more than alcoholism, but that's going on in all these 12-step programs. There are so many people out there who are still suffering when the tools are right at your fingertips. And I needed to hear that woman that day. And I started going to her home group, and she belonged to a big book study. And I've gone through this book thousands of times. I could have read it to you backwards and forwards, memorized it. I've taken people through it a million times. I went to that big book study, and I don't know what book they were reading. It was a completely different book. And all of a sudden, my head, and not in my own words, it was not in my own words. There was something else that was talking to me that said, hey, maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe you don't get it all. Maybe you need to try it again with a new mind and a new attitude. Maybe, just maybe, back to that question, the 2nd step question my sponsor asked me when I told her no, maybe, just maybe, you're not God. And with that, I started going to that meeting, and I started looking into this book in a different way with a gusto. I needed to find myself a sponsor out of that home group, and she took me through these steps again. And she took me through the first step because I certainly had gotten to a point where I did no longer believe that I was powerless over alcohol. And I needed to go through that first step again, because I go back to the fact that I am powerless over alcohol. That is the only way I am going to continue to work these spiritual principles in my life is as long as I know in the bottom of my heart, and that the idea that I'm like other people has to be smashed, that I'm going to do these things. And she took me through the second step, in which case this time I could very easily say, yes, I believe in God, because I had grown so much spiritually in this program. And, I started to, she took me through the third step. And so and I think this is hysterical. Like, I just, like what my mind as an alcoholic starts to talk to me, and what it says to me when I was going through this the first time, and when I've gone through the third step so many times, is it says that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of my trouble. And I was convinced that that was only while I was out drinking. I was convinced that that was only before I had started doing the 12 steps. I didn't realize that this is me on an absolute daily basis. And the thing is when I'm living this third step, like not when I'm living thinking that this third step no longer pertains to me, I am living on selfishness and self-centeredness. The world around me is not going the way I want it to. People aren't doing what I think they should be doing. People are victimizing me, and they're trying to, like, don't they know who I am? And well, I deserve this and I deserve that, and they should be treating me like this, and this should be happening this way. And I'm God again. I put myself in the center of my universe and think the whole world should revolve around Risa. And what this says is the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Not just my life without alcohol in it, not just my life before the steps, not just my alcoholic drinking, any life. That means raising my children. God is there. God can be there. That means going to school. God is there. My marriage, God is there. With my family, with my friends, God is there. There is nothing that God is not there. Absolutely nothing. However, I get myself into this agnostic place where I'm like, you know what? God had all of the hard stuff, but this is a little easier, and I've got this. And what happens is little by little, not enough so I'm like bashing my head against a wall, but little by little, I start being like, well, it's little, I got this. It's little, I got this. And the next thing I know is a month later, I'm like, what happened? My relationship with God is all wonky. And I wonder why everybody's not doing what I need them to do again. Why not? And really, those things are never a problem when I'm living in the spiritual solution, and the thing is talks about, the book talks about going on these sprees, and these sprees today for me, I still go on those sprees. I'm an alcoholic. The only way that I feel when I'm not spiritually fit, I need to find the quickest, fastest way to feel comfort. I need that comfort. And the last place I ever think to look for it is back in these directions and back with God. And before I can do that, I go through all these other vices. I go through the money. I go through oh my God, I can't tell you that, like how many times I've literally been up till 4 o'clock in the morning on Amazon, just trying to find the perfect, like, pop socket for my phone. Like, it's ridiculous how I can easily find something else to fill the need for spiritual experience. So I'm constantly, when I'm not practicing, not constantly, because I'm I do practice these principles in all my affairs today as much as I possibly can. I am not perfect at it, but there are still times, where I put down that spiritual toolkit and I pick up, Amazon, or I pick up, it's not Candy Crush. I like another game, but I pick up that. I pick up TikTok. I'm on Netflix all day long. I ignore my children and just play on my phone. I don't want to do my homework for school that, like, I'm blessed to be able to go back to today, and I don't want to do that. And so I just, take a nap all day long. Those are the things that I spree on today, because still self-knowledge is somewhere in me saying, oh, but you can't pick up a drink, but the knowledge is also there that says, but you can pick up the spiritual toolkit. My sponsor tells me all the time that awareness is the blessing. And one of the things that steps 3, 4, and 5 do is they provide me with that awareness. I am oftentimes, when I'm not spiritually fit, walking around asleep, dreaming that I am awake. I do not even know that I am this spiritually unfit. I'm just walking around thinking everything's great, that everybody's treating me wrong, that nobody is doing what I think they should. And it's exhausting. It is absolutely exhausting. And so 4 and 5 open me up to that. They wake me up, but being awake to it isn't enough. It's not enough. I need to do action on that. And that action is turn back to God. I can't tell you how many times I've tried to get my own spiritual defects, gone on my own. I've woken up in the morning and said, all right, God, I'm not going to be angry today. And as soon as my hand hits that, that doorknob, there I am, angry again. Like, I can't get rid of my spiritual defects, just like I can't get rid of my alcoholism. I need power in my life. I need that spiritual power in my life. I need it regularly, and so I gave it to God. My sponsor, when I did 4 and 5, she handed me a list of defects of character, and I looked at it, and I didn't even blink. I knew them all. I was not shocked by one single one of them. And I took it and I said, you know what? I don't want these anymore. And what she told me is, you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be wiped clean as snow, but as long as you're even willing to move a little, to the other side of that beam, just a little, just a smidge, then God will help you through that, and the thing is I've seen that today in my life. And now that I'm clearing up my pathway to God, I need to clean up my life. I can't be hiding from people. I can't, know that I've caused all this harm and look people in the eyes and tell them that I'm being spiritually fit today. I have to go to them face to face, and I need to make those amends. And the thing is most of those amends for me today are not, they're definitely not apologies. They're definitely not apologies, but I have to work. I have to do something with those amends. They're to close friends and family. I need to stop showing up as the selfish, self-centered Risa, and I have to start showing up as the woman who puts God and others in the center. And the thing is again, I'm unable to do that on my own. And so our book gives us absolutely beautiful and perfect instructions on how I can continue to show up, how I continue to make amends by being there and showing up as a sober woman of Alcoholics Anonymous and in recovery, by doing steps 10, 11, and 12 on a regular basis. I need to continually stay cleared out so that God can continue to come into my life, that I can continue to be a vessel of God's message. I have to continue to clean up as I go throughout the day. Step 10 is like that emergency step, you know, coming down the road, I got to get out of the way really quick. You know, that's step 10. I'm all funky and jumbled in my head. I have a tool to deal with it right then and there. And then step 11, where in the morning and at night, I can take a look at my day. Where did I do all right? Where was I wrong? That's really the more important question. And how can I do better tomorrow? And then wake up tomorrow morning and put that into a plan of action and ask God to help me show up in that way, you know, that for that day. And you know, and with those things be under my belt and continuing to live with those spiritual principles, I am able to better do step 12. I'm able to live on a spiritual basis. I'm able to bring these principles into my life, not just into an alcoholic recovery me. I can bring them to my family. I can bring them into my friendships. I can bring them into school. I can bring them into work. I can bring them everywhere and anywhere I go. And when I do that, I don't want to drink. And I'm not restless, irritable, and discontented. And I'm not selfish and self-centered. But I look at my life and I am blessed with the freedom that I have been given today. Absolutely blessed. And with that, I get to share that freedom with another alcoholic and with you. And I get to let you know today I am free. Not only am I free of alcohol, I am free of the thought of alcohol. Not only am I free of those things, but I am also free of all the things that exhaust me, like being angry at you for stupid stuff. You know, I don't have to live that way. I don't have to live my life clenched and feeling like I'm like the breath is taken out of me. I don't have to live like I'm a walking empty vessel of a human being today. I get to live free and happy and joyful today. And so I said, you know, step 11 promises are some of my absolute favorite ones. And I was gonna have them read them, but we couldn't figure out the page, but I have it here, and I'm gonna read these, and they're just absolutely, to me, amazing. And they start on page 87. It says, as we go through the day, we pause when agitated or doubtful and ask for the right thought or action. Again, I can't do it. I need that power. We constantly remind ourselves we are no longer running the show, humbly saying to ourselves many times each day, thy will be done. Thy means you. Your will be done, not Risa's will be done. Thy will. We are then, we are then in much less danger of excitement, fear, anger, worry, self-pity, or foolish decisions. We become much more efficient. We do not tire so easily, for we are not burning up energy foolishly as we did when we were trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. This is the big one. It works. It really does. I can promise anybody on this screen today that if you are suffering from this disease, any disease, these 12 steps and the directions that are laid out in the big book absolutely 100% can help you, as long as you're willing to follow a few simple rules that is put down in this book. Thank you.